Modern Christianity has a habit of making everything about the afterlife, avoiding the bad place and getting to the good place. In part one of this series, we looked at how much of our modern view of hell actually comes from Dante and pop culture rather than the Bible. Today, we're continuing our conversation by digging into the three major historical views of hell and unpacking the actual Greek and Hebrew words behind our English translations. We're asking a question that might completely change how you read the text. What if hell isn't just a future destination you're trying to avoid, but a present power we're actively dealing with right now? Welcome to the Easy Approach.
Take it easy. Take it easy.
All right, everybody, welcome in to the Easy Approach. As always, I'm your host, Nate, and I'm here joined, as always, by my good buddy, Tony.
Yes, sir. And today, as a follow-up to our previous episode where we were discussing hell, in that episode, we had our lovely guest, Michael, joining us, and he's back for round 2 as well.
He is lovely.
Yeah.
What do you have to say for yourself, you lovely son of a gun?
Back for round 2.
Back for round 2, that's right. That's right. Didn't get enough hell last time. You're in for a... You're in for
double the hell.
A hell of a time this time. Right?
Yeah.
I feel like there's a lot of... I've been bouncing around hell-based puns to use as the episode title or the series title, and I
was hell bent on coming back.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. What the hell? Like, there's all kinds of ways we could take it, but I probably don't have the cojones to pull the trigger on a dad joke podcast series title. I'm a dad, but am I dadly enough? I don't know. Well, guys, before we dive right in, because we have quite a lot of things that we wanted to get to last time, but we didn't. Some really, really important stuff. How did you guys feel about the conversation last time?
Yeah, personally, I mean, being the one that kind of perpetuated it to begin with.
This is your fault.
I was actually kind of saying this to you, I know, a little behind the scenes, Nate, but I feel like, our podcast we've been trying to be very intentional about laying certain foundations for both the Christian listener and the non-Christian listener. And that way people know where we're coming from to some degree. And this wouldn't apply to someone who this is their first episode seeing this, which is perfectly fine. I encourage you to maybe consider going back and listening to some of our previous episodes, especially the one that I keep bringing up is our Job episode, or we had like 3 of those. But the big takeaway that I personally had from those episodes was how God wanted Job to engage. God wanted Job to have the conversation, to express the frustration, to express the doubt. He didn't want Job to shut down. He definitely reminded Job of his place and who he is and how small and how much he does not know right now. But it wasn't from a context of, you're too little, you're too dumb, don't even bother. And so taking those ideas and those principles and applying them to something like a big topic of hell, it's very exciting to me because I do feel like this topic is, I don't know if misunderstood is the right word, because we do believe in hell as Bible believing Christians, but I think that there's a lot of ramifications on society, both in 2 different directions, because of this topic. So it's very exciting to me.
Yeah, totally. There were the conversation. I really enjoyed it, and I love this conversation in general. There were some parts where I thought, I wonder if someone listening thinks that, like, as I'm saying this, what I'm doing is I'm hiding my secret, deep, dark hell heresy, and that I'm like buttering them up for the big reveal. Like, actually, like, there is no hell, and I'm God, and like or some kind of craziness at the end. Yeah. That definitely. We gave the disclaimer last time, and here's the disclaimer this time. We're not aiming to be like, here is the hell expose, and we're gonna toss everything out the window, and everything you knew is a lie, and here's our crazy wackadoo belief. I think we're all, like, we qualify as Orthodox, Christian Bible believing Jesus followers. And we all believe in hell because the Bible is very, very clear that there's a hell. I think our whole desire behind this thing has been to just ask, okay, what is the Bible's view of hell? When Jesus talks about it, what exactly did he mean? And what does that mean for how we are to approach it and how we're to talk about it and how we're to live? I think that was the whole goal, and less the idea of like some kind of radical, here's the secret true view of hell that you never knew. But yes, I thought, man, I sure hope nobody thinks that I have some crazy left field, like all of them are wrong and the real one's the one I'm going to teach you right now, sort of thing going on.
And even if that was the case to some degree, without a doubt, one of my favorite things when discussing a topic that does have multiple views is the idea of strongmanning, right? Which those who are familiar with philosophy terms, this is just the idea of maybe taking something that you don't believe in yourself, or maybe you do, but something that you're trying to explain to someone else, and like making the strongest possible effort and attempt to explain that topic as reasonable as someone who actually would be a big follower or true believer of that particular idea, And so I really enjoy not holding back when it comes to all the different views and making sure that we are as informative as possible, despite obviously everyone has to decide some kind of mix of what they believe on any given topic, especially theology.
Yep. And with all that said, there were a handful of things that we really wanted to get into last time, and pretty quickly realized that we just weren't gonna have time to get there, not even close. And so I think maybe around halfway through, we made the executive decision. All right, once again, this is how it was with the Job podcast and with the End Time series, and
all the good ones,
all the above. we intended to have a one and done, and we just bit off more than we could chew. So we needed to have a second episode, and one of the most important things that we wanted to get into was historical views, like through the history of the Christian church. What have been the big, like commonly accepted to whatever degree, views of what hell actually is, what its function is, and how it all works. So I think this is a great time to get into that. Do you guys agree?
Absolutely.
Well, let's start there then. Let's talk. And obviously, within the Protestant tradition, probably over the last 400 years or so, the dominant view has been the good old eternal conscious torment view. Yeah. Which is if you don't make the cut, you don't make the line, you go into the underground, subterranean torture chamber, and you are consciously, like wakingly, tormented, tortured through all of eternity. And it's just like you're unending in your torment. Mm-hmm. That's the most popular view.
Yeah.
Am I representing that fine?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And a little bit of context as well, for going back to the beginning of this episode, why this even came up on the scene was this particular area of the conversation of hell is what's really popular right now on YouTube. So if you're listening to us right now and you've come from some of those other conversations, for example, the one that I was referring to earlier, a very well-known actor, James Cameron, was actually having a podcast with his son in early December, and they basically brought up the idea on one level or another to challenge this traditional view. Okay, whenever they believe it or not, wasn't their goal, to my understanding. Their goal is really asking the question of what we know of God. As Christians, we claim that God is truly all-loving, which means he truly wants the best for everyone. There's never a time when he wants to lash out in a petty, selfish way that causes destruction arbitrarily, right? And I really wanted to bring this context up because this is something for non-Christians as well. This is something that can be a block, a wall of understanding. It's like, how can Christians claim that they have a loving God, and how can they claim that they love people, but they're so quick to condemn anyone who is not a Christian to such a terrible, eternal conscious torment. And that's where James Kim and his son were questioning that idea.
Well, I'll throw out a real quick pros and cons, because that is the majority held view. And so people don't hold a view for no reason, right? I think if you were to look at the strengths of that view, it's a very strong vision of God dealing with wickedness. And there's something like, to the oppressed and to the hurting, Lord knows this world hasn't quite a lot of people who fall into that category. The hope of a future reckoning is something that I think is worth holding on to. Like, that's definitely a thread through the Old Testament narrative. The language is the day of the Lord, which is it's a picture of Yahweh putting a stop to depravity and wickedness and oppression and violence and all of the above. So I think that's a strength to that view. It's very strong in its view of the reckoning. And then also, like, undeniably, there have been a huge amount of people who have been converted to Christianity by that, like, through that avenue. And you might say, I don't like that. And you might say, I don't think that's a good picture of, like, the heart of God. And that isn't how you should be introduced to God. And you can say that if you want, but it's undeniable that it's been a huge, like, starting point for a lot of people through history. Weaknesses, it definitely seems like there are some pretty explicit, you could make the argument there are some pretty explicit contradictions between the heart of God as depicted throughout the entirety of the Bible and the heart of Jesus as, like, the God that is seen in his fullness in the person of Jesus. And then the idea that you would send somebody into eternal conscious torment for refusing to come to you, right? So there's strengths and weaknesses. Tony, you asked what the second view would be. Michael, I'll let you chime in here if you have one of the other two in mind you want to talk about.
Yeah, I was just going to mention with eternal conscious torment, kind of understanding, or at least even just kind of knowing some of the history is helpful on some of the early church fathers that seemed like they were kind of holding this view. I think one was Tertullian. He very much had that kind of vision that Nate was talking about with, listen, the wicked need to get their just deserts. And so if they don't get it in this life, they'll get it in the next. And I think Augustine, who is probably the most influential thinker for Western Christianity, especially Protestant Christianity, because Luther loved Augustine. So did Calvin, as I understand it. And so since Augustine was a proponent of this view, you'll see it very commonly in the West. So as torment, people are experiencing, knowingly their pain.
Yep.
The pain of being away from God, whatever that looks like. Then there's like annihilationism.
Yeah.
That's sort of that sense of you're not going to be in some sort of spirit form, feeling the flames forever. There's more a sense of, okay, if you're going to be put away from God's life and his creation force, power, then you can't exist. And so, poof, you're gone. And that's sort of the end of that. I don't want to put words into like N.T. Wright's mouth, but he seems at least he's a modern scholar who's well respected, and he seems at the very least to kind of like wink and nudge towards that view in particular. And again, there are early church fathers that held that view. And so it's not sort of like way out of the ballpark for Christians to hold and argue for that position.
Yeah. So it'd be like an interpretation of, there's like the phrase eternal fire, well, is that a fire that lasts eternally, or is that a fire that burns and the consequences are eternal? And so you could look at like Sodom and Gomorrah as an example, which is used as an example in Scripture as a picture of like what it's going to be like. They didn't burn forever. They burned until it was just gone and there was nothing left of them. And then the fire was gone. So yeah, I think you could say, well, if God is the author of all life, in terms of the strength of this view, if God is the author of all life, then total separation from him would mean no life. So yeah, I think weaknesses of that view, scriptural verses where the word eternal is like a very strong word. And you definitely have to, I'm not going to say bend it, but you have to interpret it differently than it comes off at first blush. And so I think for a lot of people, that's a rubbing point. It also is not, it isn't in vogue. It hasn't been the popular view, not so much among the scholarly community, but in terms of pop culture, in terms of like the widely held view, it hasn't been that view. And at some point, the debate became settled in the minds of the average churchgoer and the average church, the average layperson, or even the average like minister. The debate became settled a long time ago in terms of eternal conscious torment being the only valid option. So it's very, very difficult, I think, to bring up that, even though it is one of the oldest, views in terms of church history. Yeah. So that's a really difficult point for talking about that view.
I found very interesting in that particular view. You were kind of tottening to it. The idea that human souls are sort of inherently eternal / not necessarily eternal, but like immortal. They can't be destroyed. That's a bit more of a Platonic, like an idea from Plato. The Bible sort of presents humans, at least in the creation story, as beings that don't just get eternal life, forever life, unless they have the tree. But they were taken away from the tree, so they're not inherently immortal that way. And so that's like an interesting point that like proponents of this view have brought up. But yeah, again, with this view, it's like it's uncommon, or certainly much less common today. It was very common early, like in the first couple hundred years of Christianity. So you've got guys like Ignatius of, I forget which Ignatius that was, Antioch? Ignatius of Antioch. So Iggy, good old Saint Iggy, he rolled with this in particular. You've got Athanasius, some of these guys. So the wicked do ultimately perish. They do get judged. There is they get their comeuppance, but it's not until, well, forever and ever with no end.
Yeah. Yeah. So good. We have eternal conscious torment, and we have the annihilationism view. And I do think the annihilationism idea has risen in popularity over the last handful of years. I felt like it wasn't talked about at all. Like it was like anathema. Like don't bring, nothing aside from ECT, nothing aside from eternal conscious torment.
Absolutely.
And now it's a little bit more like, at least in some circles, you won't be burned at the stake immediately for bringing up an alternate view. The other view that's been more popular through history that will almost certainly get you burned at the stake unless you're very, very careful with how you phrase this or frame it would be the third one, which probably the most common term for it is universalism.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Which is the basic idea that, Rob Bell would have been the one to try to attempt to popularize it. He made a college try. The idea that God's love will continue pursuing everyone until eventually they give in and they say, okay, like, we will, like, over a period of millennia, over a period of however long it takes, eventually every single soul will say, yes, I want to go. I want to go to Yahweh. I want to go to Jesus. So, Rob Bell put out Love Wins years ago about that idea. I read the book. It's a pretty good book. I don't think all of it is just straight gobbledygook. I think there are some things he went too far in, but I do think it started a conversation that was actually very helpful, which was kind of a challenging that commonly accepted vision of eternal conscious torment. That hell picture. Which again, as we've just spent some time talking about here, over this episode and the last one, there's a whole lot of Dante and a whole lot of John Milton and a whole lot of pop culture mixed in with those ideas, and often very little Bible. So I think it was a good book in terms of Christian culture and making people think about stuff for that reason, if no other reason. In terms of strengths, go ahead, Tony.
Oh, yeah, I just wanted to jump in real quick because this is that when that book came out, this was right around the time that I was really digging deep in a lot of these areas, and I just want to paint the picture a little bit further. Like in Christian circles, that book did cause a huge splash. And I have a specific memory, and I'm not going to be like a Rob Bell apologist here or anything. And I'm not going to act like I remember this book just like I read it yesterday, because this was about a decade ago since I read this book. But I do remember coming away reading that book, kind of a similar feeling when we're talking about the Bible, that there wasn't a lot in this that people were going crazy about, or that people were talking about. In other words, it was very easy to automatically take this idea of love wins, or this idea of God eventually winning over everyone, to equal, oh, hell does not exist. We don't believe in hell. Hell is just a figment of imagination to some degree. And I think that concept that people, Christians, a lot of the times, but not only, automatically jump to a conclusion and to shut down a conversation altogether, that's dangerous. That's the territory that I would want to challenge you as a Christian and not a Christian. Don't automatically condemn the other side whenever you perceive it one way or another, that they are right or wrong, to the point that you don't even have the conversation, that you don't engage. I would make an argument that that's what Rob Bell was trying to do. He was trying to engage people, just like you were saying, Nate. But man, so many Christians were not ready for that.
Yeah.
So many Christians shut it down.
Yeah.
And it's a shame to see that.
Yeah, definitely. I think the majority of outrage came from the title and then the promotional material about the book. The book itself, I thought the book itself was almost non-offensive in terms of
that's how I felt too.
But there was a lot of like the title and even the concept of like, this guy is saying there's no hell, or he's challenging the idea of hell, and that enraged a lot of people. I do think the tendency of any side, whether we're talking about Christian camps, whether we're talking about political camps, whatever else, to read a title and then, or even like make a judgment call about what something is about or what someone believes, and then straw man it, and then become enraged about it. That's probably not the vision of humanity that Jesus embodied. Probably not. I think Jesus was probably someone who made an attempt to understand what he was engaging with. And then if he had to tear it down, he did. He wasn't afraid of it. But he definitely wasn't someone that would prop you up to, like, you know what you think? You think this. And because you think the thing that I said you think, I'm going to attack you. That wasn't him. And if it wasn't him, then I don't want to be that either. So I was actually, when the book came out, I was like, whoa, that's a little extreme, Mr. Bell. Because that was his thing. He liked being extreme and questioning things. Yeah. But I went and read the book because I wanted to understand this, what was potentially an extreme thing. And I found it like, oh man, that actually asked some very good questions. I'm not saying, therefore I believe whatever Rob Bell believes. I don't know what he's up to. The last book of his I read was that one. And it was a long, long time ago.
It was a long time ago.
But I will say, as a follower of Jesus, I want to be a lot more concerned about understanding Jesus' view of the world and not deciding, I already understand Jesus' view of the world perfectly and I can never learn anything else. That probably very effectively precludes or prevents me from ever learning anything new from Jesus, which is like a really great trap. That's a hell in and of itself, to think you figured it all out and you refuse to ever learn anything else.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, it depends on how you roll with it, because you have universalism, and it's like super far form that I think a lot of there's good reason to like not
Yeah.
roll there. Some of the church fathers, I think, we're just working off of the like God ultimately becomes all in all, and like like death and evil are abolished. So how could there be an eternal hell? Like evil shouldn't be eternal, the same way that good and righteousness is.
Yeah.
And so you can see that like they're trying to crunch on that, and you get some forms of it popping out.
Yeah.
But then their idea of hell becomes less of a like it's eternal torment forever, and hell actually starts to sound the way that they're thinking about it, like it's what do the Catholics have? That's the in-betweener
Purgatory.
stage.
Purgatory.
Mm-hmm.
Purgatory. It's hell starts to sound like purgatory then, because then they're like, no, oh, this fire that it's talking about is a purifying fire,
Yeah.
and it gives them time to purify and get out of the bad place.
Yeah. Origin, right? Origin
Yep,
of Alexandria, and then his teacher. What was his teacher's name? Also someone of Alexandria. Clement.
I forget.
Clement.
There you go.
Yeah. Clement kind of laid, as I recall, Clement viewed God as like the divine teacher, which is this idea of like using punishment to correct,
Yes.
to heal. So that idea of purification, Origen really expounded on those ideas, and I think Gregory of Nyssa, or one of the other like Cappadocian fathers, I think it was Gregory.
Yeah, it's Gregory, because that's like Eastern Orthodoxy really digs Gregory.
Mm-hmm.
And so you see this idea a little bit more in Eastern Orthodoxy.
Yes.
Where there's
And I'll,
that
another clarification. You might be thinking, why are they telling me the names of these dead guys? Part of our intention of covering these different views through history is to show you that there have been views through like major, very like important figures throughout history,
Yeah.
and like influential leaders in the Christian church through history, and different views of how they viewed or how they discussed, how they conceived of the nature of hell from a biblical perspective. That's why, some of you don't care at all. Some of you just want to get into the conversation. Others of you are ready to like put a wooden stake through our hearts and pour like garlic oil on our heads to cast out the demons or something, because we're mentioning these differences of views. The whole point is to just say there have been a variety of views through history, which is not to say that yours is wrong or mine is right.
Yeah, and you use hyperbole there, but I really think that it's important to recognize the truth there, Nate. I literally just yesterday was watching a couple YouTube videos who were throwing people who believed in that second view of hell that we brought up, the more of the annihilation, or what some people would consider conditionalism. And some YouTube videos I've seen which were not low amount on the views, and the person, like, very first words they say is like, this person is apparently no longer Christian and is officially a heretic, and we need to be aware of that. And so it's like, oh man, the kind of gall that you have to not only accuse someone of just completely not being a Christian, which there's so much to that, like, oh, you must not care about Jesus. Oh, you must be of the enemy. You must be of the devil, And so when I see other Christians take that approach, especially from the get-go, before they even have a chance to add their layered context, it's very disheartening to me. And so showing church history is probably showing church history and then biblical context are probably two of my favorite things when it comes to our conversations that we have. And of course, we also know that the other key thing that we try to do every single episode is really bring this to a grounded understanding, right? Like a today's understanding, or how can this impact us in our lives today? And so there was something that you guys were saying, and I just wanted to jump in there a little bit with, to connect to that church history of these people having these different views. And you mentioned that one of them, the way I see or I hear the view is kind of talking about the prison system that we have today, right? that when, someone commits a crime and they're found guilty and there's a punishment that hopefully matches the severity of the crime, they are sequestered from society, right? And there's a couple of reasons there. First and foremost, quarantined from society to protect society, right? To prevent further harm, further selfishness, further consequences of their destructive behavior or choices or potential of, right? But then there's the other side of it that I'm a huge fan of, quite frankly, prison reform. The idea that that shouldn't be the only thing that prisons are used for. It shouldn't be, oh, you went to jail, well, we throw the key, lock you up, you're done, for the rest of your life. Like there should be some level of rehabilitation, right? And so Michael, when you're bringing up that, there have been Christian leaders in church history that have given credence to the idea that, you know, once more, we're going to use the Rob Bell term of love wins, that God eventually wins everyone over because he does rehabilitate, because he is capable of that. Like, I don't disagree with the heart behind that. Whenever I subscribe to that thought or not, I don't disagree with the reasoning that that you were presenting there, Michael.
That's why all of us are believers in universalism.
Gotcha.
Just kidding. Just kidding. Big joke.
Once more,
Yeah,
strong manning an argument.
Yep. She's strong manning the argument. Yep. Strong manning. That's what Tony said he likes to do. Yep. Yes, that part just got clipped and shared all over the place. Like it's over for all three of us. Specifically, Michael and I, who work in like the Bible teaching
no such
world.
thing as bad
actually,
press.
It's actually cooked. Wrong, Tony. You're literally wrong. Yeah. Oh, I think on the other side of a strong manning, it is kind of pointing out the weaknesses of that
Absolutely.
idea. And the glaring weakness of that idea is if God has given people genuine free will, then it kind of like follows logically that there will be some people who ultimately and firmly say, no, I'm not interested. And nothing you could say would make me interested. The idea of like Lucifer himself, Satan. Will Satan also be won over in the end? Will God be all in all for him? Will he be restored? And I think probably nobody of any of you would say, yes, I believe that the accuser will also be restored. So if that's true, and if we agree on that idea, then it also follows to reason that there'll be many people who also reject. So there's the other side of the coin there, right? But that's why we're having this conversation, because there are strengths to all three of these views. There's real, logical, and biblical reason for people to have held these views through history. But it's worth throwing these out and rolling them around in your head for a little while.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, well, thank you guys for indulging me in covering these historical views of hell. I can't give the disclaimer enough because I really don't want to spook people out of being willing to process or ask questions. Our goal is not to say your view is right or your view is wrong. Our goal is to say, well, there have been disagreements about this through history, and so there's validation for people who have really felt ill at ease with one opinion or another. But at the same time, this doesn't seem like the particular details of whatever view of this doesn't seem something that we have to break fellowship over, if that makes sense. So all that said, let's get down to some brass tacks, as it were. The Bible, the word hell is in the Bible, is it not?
Believe so.
It depends on what you mean.
It's like you're setting a trap that we're about to walk into.
I know. Sometimes I do that. This time I didn't. If you open up your English Bible, the word hell is in it.
Yeah,
almost guaranteed. Now, obviously, if you open up your Hebrew scriptures, the word hell is not in it because hell is kind of an English like creation built off a couple other things through, if you want to get into philology and the study of words and that sort of thing. Same thing with Greek, right? The word hell isn't in it proper, but there's other words that we end up with this hell word from. So I think the problem is our English word hell is kind of a blanket term. And we've had four different biblical words that have been all translated with this English word hell. And I think there's a problem there, like as if you translated Ferrari, skateboard, tank, minivan. If you just translated all of them as vehicle, you're losing the nuance, right? Like you're losing the nuance of what it is and what it's for. So I think there's some value in taking a minute to take a closer look at each of these words, to kind of unflatten these terms, and to see what the authors of Scripture were actually picturing, or the speakers, like Jesus, were actually picturing whenever they use these terms. Sound good?
Bueno.
Real good.
Right. Well, I think we should start off with the only one that's in the Old Testament. So, pop quiz, guys. What is the only Hebrew word in the Old Testament that was ever translated as hell? Michael knows. He's just being quiet. He's just sitting there quietly.
Sheol.
It's Sheol. Yeah.
I was trying to decide if I would make a joke or not. I was going to be like chutzpah or
yeah.
something, but
Yep. Sheol is correct. Sheol is correct. And actually, another one of the words that's translated hell in the New Testament, Hades, has a lot of overlap with the Hebrew word Sheol. But let's talk about Sheol. When I say Sheol, what's the first blush reaction that you guys get?
It's definitely not an English word, and if you have never heard of an explanation of it, I don't think an American would know what that means.
Yeah.
I think unless you like reading your Psalms, you might not encounter that one. I think there are some English Bibles that will leave some of the poetry in the Psalms as Sheol, but otherwise I doubt you would run into it.
Yeah. This one's an interesting one for me because modern translations of the Bible, at least most of the ones that I find reliable, like the NASB or the ESV, in terms of dynamic equivalence, they've stopped translating Sheol as hell. They quit. And so a lot of them will either leave the word Sheol, or they'll translate it as the grave, which is kind of like signaling part of the problem here. You read the King James and it's always hell. Sheol's always hell. But then, like, if you read the Old Testament, their view of dying was that everyone goes to Sheol.
Everyone goes to the grave.
Yeah,
Huh.
Everyone goes down to the grave. So, Jacob, you know that story when Jacob has just found out that his son Joseph was supposedly eaten by animals, when really Joseph's brothers sold him into slavery and then lied about it to their dad. When Jacob hears this, he says that he's going to go down to Sheol mourning for Joseph. So is he saying I'm going to hell? I'm going to go down to hell? No, he's saying he's dying. Like the level of mourning he's experiencing here, it's gonna kill him. That's what he's indicating.
Put him right in the ground.
Gotta put him right in the ground. Or Job, actually, when Job is in all of his suffering, there's a moment where Job says, "I wish that I could go down to Sheol to get away from my suffering." Basically, in other words, like I'd rather be dead than continue living this way. So there's like this imagery of like dust, silence, shadows, the pit, like a non-life, like a shadow life existence. But it's a grave thing. It's definitely a grave. In the New Testament, Hades is used this way as well, where there's like it's like there's not a lake of fire when you roll up the idea of Sheol and Hades. It's this place that everyone's going to go. Like the tragedy of death is going to swallow everyone up eventually with the current world order, the current state of things. Now, there's a bit of an evolution of the idea of like afterlife. By Jesus' time, Jews believed that like Sheol or Hades it had like compartments almost. Like when you read about the parable of the rich man and Lazarus, there's a good side to being dead, where you're experiencing like the sustaining power of the life of God. So they called it Abraham's bosom, like going to be with Father Abraham. And then there's like a bad side somehow. But Sheol and Hades in particular, it's just this place that everyone is going to go. Everyone goes down to the grave.
And Hades had some of that to it as well. If you've ever played the video game Hades, you actually get a little taste of that, because you have like those deeper levels of Hades that are supposed to be like, this is where the really bad guys get to experience some judgment or torment, like
Tartarus.
What's the name of the guy? Yeah, Tartarus, and then the fellow who has to roll the boulder eternally. Is that
yeah, I can't say his name.
There we go.
Sisyphus.
Yeah. So that's one of those. And then if you're one of the great heroes, you lived a lovely life, you end up in a different part of Hades, and I'm going to blank on the name of that as well. That's like that. Once you're playing the video game Hades, you get to that third.
The Fields of Elysium.
Like Elysium. Yeah.
Yeah, I forget if Elysium. I forget if that is like the Latin term or if that's Greek as well. But it's that sense of, and then there's a nice place in Hades.
Yeah,
the realm of the dead, for those who lived rightly or at least heroically or whatever the gods are chill about.
Right. Yeah, there's all the Greek, it's like the loaded Greek mythology into the word Hades for sure. But it was this idea of like everyone's going there, like 100% of people are going there. What your existence looks like once you're there depends very, very heavily on the kind of life you've lived. So they have that idea. But those words, Sheol and Hades, have a lot of that parallel, which is like you're all going to the grave. There's one other one that pops up, and it's actually, like, now that we've talked about Hades, like, it's Tartarus. So of those views of the levels of Hades, with the people of virtue going to Elysium, and then what is it, the Fields of Mourning? Is it the Fields of Mourning that people who died without getting to be with the one they loved or something?
Yeah,
is
something like that.
Yeah. So then Tartarus is like the prison, right? And that shows up one time in the Bible where Peter is going to throw that out in 2 Peter. And then basically Peter says that God has cast angels that have rebelled. So like Genesis 6, like angels, down to Tartarus, which is, it's a copy paste from Greek mythology. It's that dungeon where the Titans were imprisoned. So it's the holding cell for a supernatural rebellion, but it's not the destination for humans. Not typically. So I think what that shows is the Bible authors, like Peter, were willing to use cultural language and even pagan myths to communicate a point about the justice of God. Because there's a whole lot of baggage with the idea of Hades and Tartarus culturally in the mythology that definitely no one would want to import over into Christian theology. So he's making some kind of point, and the point seems to be the justice of God in the face of divine rebellion. But what about Gehenna?
So I've heard of this one, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I'll give my basic understanding is that, especially in the Old Testament for the Jewish people, maybe it wasn't just exclusive to them, but there was basically this was a large community that the Jews had when they were trying to make their way to the Promised Land, or even at the beginnings of the Promised Land. I'm not sure. But because it wasn't just like, oh, hey, 20 or 30 or even 100, couple hundred people, but it was way more than that, that they produced a lot of trash, a lot of refuse. And this was basically a specific area that was separate from where they lived or from where they have established at the moment, where they brought all this trash and they burned it or something or another. Obviously, no one wants to live next to the trash heap, but that's what I've always heard about this one. Would that be accurate?
Yeah, Michael, have you heard that as well?
Yeah, I've heard some of that sort of there's the garbage heap, and what at the time I think there was the idea that what do you do with garbage heaps? Well, you light them on fire to get rid of them. So now you have fiery garbage heaps. And I've been to places in the world where, people gather the trash and then burn them. And that sucks. It's like hell. It smells and it stings your lungs.
Mm.
Um, and you're getting just blasted with microplastics.
Yeah.
But anyway,
Yeah.
besides that, the valley itself has more history that goes into the Old Testament.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
With some additional nuance to it that's helpful.
Yeah.
But the imagery for sure that's a big part of it.
Yeah. Yeah. This particular word, Gehenna, whenever Jesus refers to the idea of hell or uses a phrase that's translated as hell, this is what he uses. It's Gehenna. And both of you are right. It's your English Bibles are always going to translate Gehenna as hell. And then Gehenna in Greek it's the Greek version of the Hebrew phrase geh and then Hinnom. So geh means valley, and Hinnom is like a proper name. And you're right. It was a literal valley. It's like on the like if you take Jerusalem, like the capital city, it's like on the southwest border of Jerusalem, and it is a literal valley that you can go to today. Like you can go to Gehenna or Gehinnom. However,
you too can go to hell.
You can go to hell
if you would like.
right now, today. And Jesus says, people who live this way or do that way will be cast into the fiery Gehinnom, fiery valley of Hinnom, which is right over there. And he could have pointed at it if he wanted to. It's right over there. Here's a little crucial bit of extra info, though. The idea that Gehenna was a garbage dump, there's actually zero ancient evidence.
Nice.
And I have to bring it up because
I love it. I didn't know that.
I've heard that a billion times.
Yeah.
There's that idea has been repeated since literally like the medieval. Like there's evidence of that idea showing up in medieval times in terms of a presentation of what this word meant in the Bible. But there's no ancient evidence for it whatsoever. Now, luckily, we don't have to just end the conversation there. Because what Michael said is spot on. It is a very loaded location.
Mm-hmm.
It's loaded. It wasn't a dump. It was, I guess, what you could call like a crime scene, or a crime scene on a national level. Michael, do you happen to know off the top of your head what went on in the Valley of Hinnom?
Man, off the top of my head, if I'm remembering correctly, that is it's like a place of idolatry. I think that was where they set up some it's where you would offer your children as sacrifice. Is what I can remember. I honestly don't have my notes in front of me for that.
You've got it. That particular location. It was a valley owned by a guy, and gave it away, and so on and so forth. But it was a valley where, where the sites of some of the worst acts of Israel's idolatry, worshiping other gods in like heinous and violent ways, happened. When you think of some of the worst kings through history, you can think of like King like Manasseh. This was like the location where that sort of stuff was happening. Specifically, if you go read 2 Chronicles chapter 28, it talks about how the Israelites set up altars to Moloch, so a foreign deity, and the primary way that you worshipped Moloch was by offering your own children as blood sacrifices. So you would kill your own children in exchange. The idea was in exchange for like national security or national prosperity. And so in the mind of the Jewish person, the Valley of Hinnom it's a dark, dark place. The most messed up things that your people group had ever done happened right over there.
Jeez.
Not only that, but the Bible is going to take that idea and expound upon it even later, because the Bible in the Old Testament spans a very long period of time. So if you guys are of course familiar with the prophet Jeremiah. It's one of the bigger books in the Bible, one of the major prophetic books. Jeremiah, if you go you can check it out in Jeremiah chapter 7 or chapter 19. Jeremiah stands in that valley, and he gives it the name the Valley of Slaughter. And he gives a warning.
Jeremiah was way hardcore.
He was very, very hardcore, and he didn't shy away from being very controversial. And so what he did was he stood in that valley, he named it the Valley of Slaughter, and he gave a warning to the people. He said, basically, because you burned your children here, and because you've continued to walk in that same kind of idolatry, this is going to be the place where when Babylon attacks this massive emperor, this place is going to turn into your own mass grave.
Jeez. And that probably actually happened, huh?
and it did. It did happen. So there's this interesting little picture here of not just a place where God says, because you did something unrelated, you're going to suffer at this spot. Specifically, this is the valley of the slaughter you've done on your own children. And then this is going to be the place where your evil is going to rebound upon itself. This is going to be the place where your acts of evil are going to implode upon themselves. The fire that you lit to save yourselves, to kill your own children in exchange for national security and prosperity, that will be the same fire that will consume you. So Jesus then shows up, and this is on the Sermon on the Mount in Matthew chapter 5. He warns of the fiery valley of Hinnom. When he warns about that, he's actually quoting from Isaiah 66, who's another place in the Bible, another prophet that refers to this valley as a picture of fire and violence rebounding upon violence, imploding upon violence. And the imagery is the corpses of rebels outside the city where the fire never goes out. And so basically what Jesus does is he connects this picture of anger and contempt and whatever else to that valley specifically. In the Sermon on the Mount, he talks about anger you have towards your brother and letting anger grow exponentially until it turns to the act of murder. And he's speaking to a group of people that are increasingly full of hatred towards their Roman oppressors. Those of you who know a little bit about history know that in Jesus' time in the first century, Jesus as a Jew, the Jewish people were under Roman occupation. They were controlled by the Roman emperor. Those of you who really like history know that in 70 AD, the Jewish people rebelled against the Roman emperor, rebelled against Rome, in a violent rebellion that ultimately ended with the destruction of the temple and the genocide of an incredible amount of the Jewish people. It became a valley of Hinnom again.
Oh, wow.
Where the city was filled with corpses and filled with fire because what they did was they embraced a way of violence. So Jesus, he looks at these people that are increasingly embracing a way of violence toward their enemies, and he said, you beware of seeing your own evil rebound upon itself. Beware of seeing your own actions consume you with your own kind of evil. I think we've all heard the garbage dump story, but I think the truth is even scarier than that, which is not just where they burn trash, it's where they burn children. Yeah. And it's this place where it's like a monument to what happens when human evil goes unchecked. Like a picture of hatred and contempt not just being bad emotions. They're the sparks that start the fire of the fiery Gehenna.
Gosh, yeah, I find that fascinating, especially just for me, the understanding, and we've spoken about this one a couple of times too, about when Jesus showed up on the scene and claimed to be the Messiah in the ways that he did, there are so many of the Jewish people who were expecting the Messiah to be a conqueror, to be that violent leader that was successful in their violence, in finally dethroning the oppressors, the Romans, or anyone who has come against the Jews, which is God's people, And so it's you're telling me the way that I'm understanding this is this was a historical valley where originally, terrible, terrible things was done here. But like Jesus takes this and basically says, look, if you keep thinking that the way to be a good Jew, or the way that this Messiah is going to come and conquer your enemies, you're going to end up committing some of the same sins that these people committed when they sacrificed their own children, because of a misunderstanding that the violence that you cause is not going to solve your problems. It's going to put you in a living hell. It's going to put you right back into that valley where that violence is going to come right back at you, even worse, because you're misunderstanding that the kingdom that I bring has nothing to do with external violence and external force, but it's an internal kingdom.
Yeah, yeah. And in Mark chapter 8, Jesus talks about Gehenna again, and he connects it with that Isaiah 66 link thing, where Jesus is going to quote it from Isaiah directly and say, and in Gehenna, where the worm doesn't die and the fire isn't quenched, which is right out of Isaiah. But in Isaiah 66, Isaiah is painting a picture of like the restoration of all things. Like when God makes everything right, he's going to restore all things, and there's going to be a new Jerusalem. The picture of a new heaven and a new earth, but a new Jerusalem. And as God restores all things, there's going to be things outside of the city. And so that picture of like the worm doesn't die and the fire isn't quenched, there's corpses outside the city, but it seems to be an image of decreation, which Jesus here connects with this picture of Gehenna, this state of being like outside the city of life. The worm, the fire, it's like agents of, there's like decomposition and destruction. And it's the final ruin of people who refuse to enter into like restoration and like the city, like the new life, and who instead are choosing their own way. And then in that picture, as Jesus connects it to Gehenna, it's that evil rebounding upon evil. And I think the most important, like, final step to take here with the discussion of Gehenna is how James contributes to it. And those of you who have listened to our podcast on the end times and listened to the episode about heaven, we talked about this briefly. In James chapter 3, James talks about the power of the tongue. And he says, with the tongue, we have the ability to bless and build up. But with the same tongue, we have the ability to tear down and destroy with destructive, eroding words. And he says, when we do that, when we use the tongue to destroy, our tongues, he says, are set on fire by Gehenna. So I think that's arguably the most practical single verse on hell in the Bible. I think the essence of hell, from the Jesus perspective, is not only a destination you go to later. It's a power that is very present and invading the present right now. That when we use our actions, our words, our tongue, our abilities, whatever else, to destroy, manipulate, deceive, commit violence, seek our own way first, seek our own well-being above all else. Like we're literally, according to James, channeling the power of Gehenna, the power of like human action and human evil rebounding upon human evil to destroy, but also to be destroyed. We're literally, in his words, we're bringing Gehenna into earth.
Yeah.
So I think Gehenna it's the place where, in Jesus' mind, it's the place where human evil, human worshiping of things that are not God, and human violence and human whatever reaches its peak, but then also consumes itself. Is it punishment? Yeah, but I think it's often framed as a consequence. But I think it's God saying, if you love the fire of anger and idolatry and violence and all these things so much, you can have it, but you can't have it inside my kingdom. So I don't think Jesus threatens Gehenna to people as a way of forcing them to obey rules. I think rather it's a warning that their hatred and their actions it's leading them to a kind of cosmic like self-destruction
Yeah, a
almost.
cosmic consequence.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I find that fascinating. Um, I think that just the idea that what you were talking about, James, and how the power of the tongue in these what we say, and not just talking about what we say, but ultimately the selfish decisions that we make and the destructive consequences they have on ourselves and those around us, because we're all human. We all make crappy choices at different points in our lives for different reasons. Um, that is literally bringing hell forth, and why it's so imperative that Jesus and God are trying to do the opposite. They're trying to eradicate hell on earth and instead establish heaven on earth. Right? Is that a correct way of understanding that?
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's a really big mistake to only think of heaven and hell as future realities only.
Yes.
I think Jesus comes to bring heaven to earth, and then he invites us to partner with him to do the exact same thing. On the other hand, we can embrace the path of defining right and wrong in our own eyes, and then according to James, unleash Gehenna, unleash hell into earth as a present reality right now. I think Jesus hates hell.
Mm-hmm.
I think he hates Gehenna. I think he wants, I think it was Tim Mackey who said this. Jesus wants to get the hell out of you. And like, don't get it twisted. Like Jesus wants to help you live a hell, like a Gehenna-free existence.
Hell-free life
is what he invites you into. A life that is an overlap between you and God space. And so I think all the places on earth where everything is dark and hopeless, like you're looking at Gehenna in action. You're looking at hell in action. And from the biblical perspective, the beautiful promise is one day there will be no more Gehenna left. One day there will be no more hell left. And, like there's a lot of details that I really want to know the mechanics of, as far as like, give me all right, God, here's the 3 big views of hell. Like, give me the one that is right or whatever else. But it feels to me like we form very careful systems based on some very, I'm not going to say it's vague words, but I'm going to say it is, we get very clear pictures of exactly what we are supposed to do. And then there's a bunch of other things that we're like, well, exactly how does this work? It feels to me that we don't have enough information to have a thoroughly fleshed out system of exactly how the afterlife looks.
Yeah. And I would make the argument that the reason why, at least amongst Christians, or even those who look down on Christianity because of their extreme view of exclusion when it comes to hell, that if you're not a Christian, if you don't believe these specific things that they do, that everyone else is going to go to this place where they're going to get tortured forever. The reason why, I would argue the reason why that fascination exists within the church is because of what we have almost all been raised with, the understanding that it's a heaven and a hell problem. That Christianity is all about making sure we don't end up in the bad place, and making sure that us and our family, and if we're good Christians and we care about others, we're going to work so hard to make sure that everyone knows that you can go to the good place. You can go to heaven. You see what I'm saying? Like there's been such a distorted focus on, like you said, that these future destinations. When we die, we go to one of these 2 places, and of course, there's going to be an obsession over the really bad one that everyone, it's like, man, that motivates me. Hell motivates me more than anything else. Should it? Should that be our motivating factor? And you said something, Nate. You said that when using the word Gehenna, that Jesus is, from your perspective, Jesus's goal, his motivation is not to use hell as a motivation for others, as a punishment for others, to get them to to follow his words. It's not, hey, become Christ-like, otherwise you're going to go to hell. I think that morbid fascination within Christianity exists because we do focus on that location problem. And that's where, if this is probably one of your first times hearing this as a listener, we really want to challenge you, like what Nate said. Like, if you're really looking at the Bible, we have all this information about heaven and heaven on earth and the Garden of Eden, and how God wants to establish that in our hearts, and how Jesus was the first one to lead that invasion of heaven on earth. Why should we obsess to the nth degree on something that we do not have as much information on, that maybe we shouldn't be our motivation for being better people, for internally being a whole person? I think that internal message that Jesus is getting across is so imperative.
Yeah, and to clarify, I think the Bible and Jesus is very, very clear that God will not allow evil to be a part of his new
Absolutely,
creation.
absolutely.
Like he's going to address it and deal with it radically. But it also seems to be that the vision that Jesus uses for that is a picture of evil destroying evil, and evil rebounding upon itself within the valley of Gehenna. So then it's like, well, okay, I get that picture in right at the end of Revelation or in Isaiah 66 of the new creation. And then there's everyone who is letting evil rebound upon evil outside of the city. Like they're not a part of the city. They're not a part of the new creation. Yeah. So it's like, okay, give me the details. Give me the mechanics. Give me the baseline. And I think I mentioned this last time. I think if we were meant to have a 5-step plan, then we would have been given a 5-step plan. But it seems to be way more complicated than that, and maybe to the degree that we weren't given all the details about the mechanics of that thing, because maybe we would obsess over it. And then we do anyways. Even though we have such a small amount of details. Exactly. But what we are given is a very clear picture of what the point is. Yeah. Right? The point is, Jesus wants to get the hell out of earth and the hell out of us, the Gehenna out of us, and to invite us into an overlap between God's space and God's vision for what it means to be a human, and then our own lives. Here's the deal. I'm taking a hard look at the clock here. And, I don't want to ham this up too much. We had a secret conversation off camera, a little secret conversation. But now that you know that, I'm going to ham it up. Guys, I'm looking at the clock here, guys. And I'm realizing we just don't have enough time to talk about all the great stuff we want to talk about. Again, surprise, here we are again. Once again, realizing that we've bit off more than we could chew, or at least for the amount of time that we have. So we have decided unilaterally, we've decided that we're going to have a third episode. And you know what? I'm not even going to say that's the last one, because I keep saying that, and I keep making a liar of myself.
It's a super easy thing to say.
Yeah, we're going to have at least one more episode. What we wanted to do is get into kind of some modern perspectives, some quotes from people that we either look up to or don't look up to, or even quotes from people who have been dead for a long time, and just kind of throw out those little clippets, little snippets of different perspectives of hell. And after all this conversating, just kind of do a pulse check for each one of us. How does that land? How do we like that? How does that play out with how we see that functioning in the vision of Jesus for the world, and how Gehenna or hell operates or doesn't? That's what it's going to look like next time. So if that sounds interesting to you, tune in. If it feels like you guys really haven't finished your conversation, you're right, and we're coming up with the next part soon here.
The next episode is probably the most likely place where one of us will say something heretical. So tune in next time.
Yeah, I've been thinking it the whole time.
The whole thing, we really just do want to kind of hash this out from a biblical perspective and say there are definitely parts of modern culture's picture of hell, like we talked about last time, that don't line up with the Bible's picture, and there are parts that do. So that'll be the next step next time. And Tony, Michael, this has been a difficult conversation.
Nah, it's super easy.
It's a difficult topic. It's So what we do around here, we only pick the hard stuff on the easy approach for whatever reason. Yep. But Tony, as always, thanks for being here, and Michael, you've been indispensable. I appreciate you guys' time.
Great to be here. Thanks.
For everyone out there, we couldn't be doing this if it wasn't for you guys listening. So thanks for tuning in, and you know what? As always, take it easy.